Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're exploring a totally different way of looking at the autumn and winter months. We're going to dive into why the darker half of the year is actually nature's most sacred invitation to rest, to root down, and to gently transform. Let's just jump right in.
We live in a world that constantly demands productivity, right? Like a year-round summer of doing and achieving. But instead of fearing the darkness or just pushing through it like nothing's changed, this framework suggests we actually recognize this quiet time for what it truly is. As the quote on the screen perfectly captures, rest is not the absence of growth. It is often where growth begins. Think about a seed. It doesn't just sprout immediately, it literally needs the dark first.
Now, consider the massive shift in perspective this season offers us. As the days grow noticeably shorter and the air gets that crisp bite to it, the veil between our visible, busy outer world and our invisible internal world gets kind of thin. This season is basically handing us radical permission to just slow down. It's a literal invitation to take a deep breath and actually listen to what's going on inside.
To really wrap our heads around this, let's look at the stark contrast in nature's rhythm. I mean, summer demands this expansive, visible fire. It's all about outward energy, radiating, and being seen. But the darkening season beautifully requires the exact opposite. It asks us to receive, to gently draw our energy downward, and to literally root into the earth. You know, you aren't meant to be the exact same person who entered the summer. The wheel turns, and so do we.
Moving into our first section, let's look at some foundational practices.
So how do we actually do this? Well, to truly inhabit this inward shift, we can embrace foundational practices that act as kind of like natural composting for the soul. Rather than viewing things like shadow work, dream work, or processing grief as these heavy, burdensome chores or signs that something is wrong, we need to think of them as absolutely vital tools. Honoring our dreams as the nights get longer and allowing grief to process what has ended, these are the actual mechanisms we use to clear space for the future.
Energetically speaking, this is very much a root chakra season. Our practice right now is to draw all that scattered outward energy back down into our bodies. Think of a tree pulling its sap all the way down from the branches into its roots to prepare for winter. By doing this, we find a deep, unshakable sense of safety and belonging, even as the world outside is getting colder and a whole lot darker.
Section 2. Archetypal Guides for the Dark.
As we make this descent, it's pretty comforting to know we aren't walking alone. Ancient archetypes provide this fascinating mythological context for our own internal shifts. First up, we can look to Heke at the crossroads. She's the guide we call on to help navigate our choices when the path forward is totally obscured by shadows. She reminds us that the dark isn't some enemy to be defeated, but a profound teacher holding a lantern for us.
Then there is Persephone. Persephone reminds us that descending into our own depths is a sacred, temporary phase, not a permanent state. Moving between the light of the upper world and the dark of the underworld is just a natural, completely necessary cycle of life. It's not a detour, it's part of the path.
And we draw some incredible courage from the ancient Sumerian myth of Inanna. To enter the underworld, she literally had to pass through 7 gates, willingly shedding her crown, her jewels, and her royal robes at each one. What she teaches us is that shedding our outward identities, the roles we play for everyone else, is truly the only way to meet our truest, most essential selves deep down.
Now for Section 3, the monthly journey from the equinox to the solstice.
So, the crucial point here is grounding all this rich mythology into our actual everyday calendar. This timeline visually traces the Earth's natural arc. We start with a moment of perfect balance at the September equinox. Then, we move through October's thinning veil, down into November's stark, honest descent, and finally, we arrive at a point of really deep rest at the December solstice. Let's break down each of these specific gates. In September, we stand at the gate of harvest. This is a time of second harvest, where we basically take an honest inventory of what grew well for us this year, and honestly, what didn't. It's a moment to gently start adjusting our daily routines. Maybe that means opting for warm breakfasts, or winding down earlier in the evenings, just as the daylight begins to fade.
There's a really fascinating connection here from the source material. In traditional Chinese medicine, autumn is governed by the lungs and the large intestine. The lungs take in a new breath, while the large intestine releases what is complete. This physiological reality beautifully mirrors the big seasonal question you should be asking yourself right now. What are you finally ready to gracefully release?
Then, October arrives with this luminous, burning beauty. I mean, the trees are practically on fire with color. And this brilliantly illustrates a really vital lesson.
the act of letting go doesn't have to be some tragic event. It can actually be a vibrant, gorgeous process. It's a transition marked by samahan, where the veil between worlds is at its thinnest.
There's this great thought in the text. Nature never asks the oak to bloom in October. In fact, trees drop their leaves precisely so they don't dehydrate and die in the winter frost. So why on earth do we expect ourselves to stay in perpetual summer? Just as those trees drop their brilliant leaves without a hint of mourning, simply to conserve energy for their roots, we really must ask ourselves what outward layers we need to shed right now to uncover our own essential core. By the time November rolls around, the leaves are gone. The flashy beauty of October is replaced by bare branches. November strips away absolutely everything non-essential. But the source material urges us to reframe this completely. This is not some gloomy problem we need to manage, it's a powerful initiation. It's a time to move through with really honest reflection, finally paring down your schedule and stripping back your commitments. With our energy naturally dropping and our vital ancestral essence drawing inward, November prompts a difficult but absolutely necessary question. What does true rest look like when you stop performing for everyone else? Seriously, if you gave yourself full permission to rest without guilt, if you didn't have to be productive, what would you do? Honoring this deep need for sleep and quiet during this season isn't lazy, it's profound wisdom. Finally, we reach December. Culturally, we all know this is pretty much the most frantic, stressful, and busy month of the entire year. But biologically and seasonally, December is absolutely not meant to be a month of doing. It is a time of arriving at the still point. It's about conserving your life force, kind of like animals hibernating, so that energy can eventually surge again when spring comes around.
Section 4. The solstice return, and finding that still point.
All of this preparation brings us to the culmination of the season. At the winter solstice, the longest night of the year, the wheel reaches its absolute still point. The earth literally takes a breath, and then, imperceptibly at first, the light is quietly, certainly reborn. The solstice isn't a finish line, though. It is a sacred threshold. If you've allowed yourself to release in September, strip away in October, descend in November, and rest in December, you arrive at this threshold fundamentally changed. You step through the darkness as someone who has finally learned to walk comfortably within it, knowing for sure that the light always returns. Now, the beautiful, grounding seasonal wisdom we've been exploring throughout this explainer is drawn directly from the Codex of Rest and Return. It's an incredibly detailed, beautifully put together yearly guide created by Jessica Holt and Joyful Healing. It provides these amazing daily rhythms, recipes, and practices for cyclical living, and I highly recommend checking it out via her Patreon if you want to dive deeper into this framework. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to carry into the longer nights ahead. Instead of fighting the dark, I invite you to embrace it. Ask yourself this: what powerful, new intention, what dormant seed are you going to plant in the quiet dark this year, trusting it to bloom when spring finally returns? Thanks so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the rest.